My twin sisters bullied me my whole life, then chose to live as a throuple with our stepbrother. They always stood together, shoulder to shoulder, like a single organism with two faces, while I stood a few steps away, never quite part of the picture. That's how my childhood looked in every family photo. Two identical girls leaning into each other, whispering, laughing, sharing secrets, and me on the side, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong to be born one person short of a set. My sisters are twins. Not the sweet, inseparable kind people romanticize, but the kind that uses unity like a weapon. From as early as I can remember, they treated me like an inconvenience. They had their own language, their own jokes, their own rules. If I tried to join, they'd roll their eyes. If I spoke up, they'd talk over me in stereo. At school, at home, at family gatherings, it was always them, and then there was me. They bullied me in small, precise ways. Never enough for adults to take seriously. They'd accidentally hide my things, whisper about me while staring directly at me, agree loudly that I was annoying, weird, dramatic. If I cried, they'd exchange a look like I'd proven their point. And because there were two of them and only one of me, the adults always assumed I was the problem. "You're too sensitive," they'd say. "They're just joking," they'd say. "Why can't you be closer to your sisters?" As if closeness was something I'd refused instead of something I'd never been offered. When our father remarried, I hoped things might change. A new house, a new dynamic, a chance to finally reset the roles we'd been stuck in. Our stepmother moved in with her son, who was a few years older than us. He was quiet, awkward, and clearly uncomfortable being dropped into an already tense family. At first, he barely spoke to any of us. The twins noticed him immediately. At first, it was harmless, or at least it looked that way. They suddenly cared about family dinners. They laughed louder. They dressed nicer. They competed in subtle ways, constantly one-upping each other's stories whenever he was around. I watched it all from the sidelines, feeling that familiar sense of being invisible. Then it stopped being subtle. They fought over him openly. Not screaming matches, but cold wars. One would sit closer to him, the other would interrupt. One would cook something he liked, the other would mock it. The house filled with tension so thick you could taste it. Our stepmother pretended not to notice. Our father stayed quiet. And I stayed out of it, because for once, I wasn't the target. I assumed it would pass. Teen crushes do. It didn't. Years went by. We grew up. Moved out. Lives scattered, or so I thought. I stayed distant from them, emotionally and physically. It was easier that way. Every interaction still carried that old hierarchy. Them together, me alone. I built my own life, my own circle, my own sense of self that didn't revolve around being the unwanted third. Then I found out the truth. Not from them. Of course not. I heard it through a relative who said it in a half-laughing, half-whispering tone, like gossip that wasn't supposed to be repeated but was too strange to keep quiet. "They live together now," she said. I asked who. She named my sisters. Then she added his name. At first, I thought I'd misunderstood. I asked her to explain. She did. They weren't just roommates. They weren't just close. They had decided, together, that instead of choosing between the twins, he'd be with both of them. They moved in as three adults, openly presenting themselves as a unit. No secrecy. No shame. Just a quiet agreement that this was their solution. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. Not because of jealousy. Not because I wanted him. But because something about it felt deeply, profoundly wrong. Not just socially uncomfortable, emotionally twisted. These were the same two people who had clung to each other their entire lives, who never allowed space for anyone else, now binding a third person into their closed system. A system I had spent my life being crushed by. What made it worse was how everyone reacted. They didn't react. No outrage. No intervention. No, this is unhealthy. My stepmother defended it instantly. She said they were adults. She said love is complicated. She said people should be open-minded. Our father looked uncomfortable but stayed silent. Other relatives shrugged and changed the subject. They normalized it. I tried to mind my own business. I really did. I told myself it wasn't my life, not my responsibility. But then came the family dinner. We were all at the same table for the first time in years. The twins sat on either side of him, mirroring each other as always. Same posture. Same expressions. He laughed, looking back and forth between them, occasionally calling one by the other's name and correcting himself with a grin. That part broke something in me. He didn't really see them as individuals. Not fully. How could he, when they'd never allowed themselves to be separate? And yet, this was the arrangement everyone was applauding as mature and progressive. At some point, the conversation turned to living arrangements, future plans, holidays. They spoke as a single voice, finishing each other's sentences, talking about our relationship like it was a project they'd perfected. I couldn't stop myself. I said it was disturbing. I said it was unhealthy. I said it was cringe, and that pretending this was normal didn't make it so. The table went silent. My stepmother snapped first. She told me to stop. She told me I was being judgmental. She told me I didn't understand because I was alone. The word landed exactly where she intended it to. My sisters didn't defend themselves. They didn't need to. They just smiled at each other, that same old look, like I was once again the outsider causing unnecessary drama. In that moment, everything clicked. They hadn't changed. They hadn't grown. They'd just found a new way to stay fused together, and once again, the family had chosen to protect their bond at the expense of my reality. I left early. No one followed me. Later, I heard that my reaction had been framed as jealousy. Bitterness. Inability to accept different lifestyles. It was easier to paint me as intolerant than to admit that something about this dynamic was deeply wrong. What hurts most isn't their relationship. It's the pattern. Two people choosing each other at all costs. A third person absorbed rather than truly loved. And me, always positioned as the problem for noticing. I've stopped attending family events. I don't argue anymore. I don't explain. Eve spent my entire life trying to earn space in a system that never wanted to make room for me. Now I don't want it. Some families don't break loudly. They fracture quietly, under layers of denial and forced smiles. And sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is step away from the madness, even when everyone else insists it's normal. Because being alone is better than being the third wheel in a family that never saw you as whole.